doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 6, Week 5 around the NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers coming off the back of a 38-27 victory over ACC rival Syracuse. A great performance from quarterback C.J. Kirk, 352 yards and 3 touchdowns to lead the offense. Jacob Laughlin, solid game defensively. It was a good performance from the Panthers all around. The defense played well. Of course, Syracuse was buoyed by 2 touchdowns that were given by mistakes from the Panthers. Jay Keys, of course, a bad pitch in the first quarter that Josh Dukes returned back to the end zone for a touchdown. Cameron Humphrey took back a pick 6 as well, put the Panthers behind the 8 ball early, but Kirk was able to rebound, have a great performance. He threw 2 touchdown passes in the second half. Really solid bounce back from him, 350 yards passing, so one of his best days at the helm of the Panthers offense. And it was a great win. Pitt did get 2 touchdowns from fellow freshman Davion Reynolds as well. He linked up with Kirk for a big touchdown pass when he motioned out of the backfield, and then he did have a rushing touchdown to really put the game out of reach. And that was the big thing for the Panthers. Their own mistakes hurt them. They gave up big plays. Trey Fenton had a huge touchdown reception, which was the reason why Syracuse was able to get their last touchdown, their only offensive touchdown, and bump their passing yards up. You take away that one play, they only throw for like 120 yards passing. Pitt, almost 500 yards of total offense. Kirk, 352 passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Great game for him, 68% completion percentage as well. He takes some shots down the field, which the Panthers like to see. He had a couple of passes, maybe more, that could have been intercepted, so he's like the Panthers would like him to be a little bit safer in that regard, but it was a great game for him nonetheless. Rushing attack was okay, about 150 yards rushing. Reynolds 50 yards, London 50 yards. Decent day for them. Sibley struggled a bit. Kirk didn't get much going. He had a 22-yard naked bootleg late in the game that ended up pushing him back into positive yardage totals. Jay Keys, 6 catches for 49 yards. And that's the thing you can see with basically every receiver except for Keys. They were going for big plays. Ogden had a 23-yard catch. Welsh had a 54-yard grab. Paul Lease, 5 for 91 with a 34-yard grab. Davion Reynolds had a 58-yard catch. Jay Keys, long was 14 yards, and he was a possession guy. Big thing you like to see for the Panthers here, no drops in this game, which was fantastic. Keys, though, 6 catches for 49 yards. He was a possession guy. He was getting first downs for the Panthers. He was the guy they'll go to on 3rd and 6 to get those 6 or 7 yards that they needed. And so it's a little bit different from what you see from Keys this year than what he was doing last year. He was a big play guy last year. He doesn't have blinding speed, which is a lot of times why, he doesn't get those big, deep plays. But the Panthers just used him. They know he's their sure-handed receiver. The guy won the Blitnikoff last year. He's the best receiver in college football, arguably. And so he made some plays there for the Panthers. Interesting to see here. The defense played well. Only gave up 300 yards. Like I said, they had one big play that they gave up. Otherwise, they were very good. But didn't have a single sack today. Didn't have an interception. Didn't force a turnover. And yet still had a good game defensively. So that's one thing that you're very happy to see out of the Pitt defense is that even on days when they're not forcing the issue on their opponent, dragging them back with sacks. I think the Panthers have led the country in sacks for the last 3 seasons. This year does not look to be the year that they're going to do that. Jalen Hills leads the team in sacks after 4 games. I think he only has 3 sacks. The Panthers last year had 2 guys with 17 sacks or more. I think Darren Toth finished with, 19? Sean Wolfgang had 17, something of that nature. They both had absurd sack years. This year, the Panthers don't even, it remains to be seen if they'll even have a guy that breaks double digits, the way things have gone so far. But the Panthers defense still did well. Syracuse, they moved the ball okay. Of course, Trey Fenton had that big 71-yard touchdown, but otherwise Syracuse didn't do too much passing the ball. Washington just a little bit inaccurate for Syracuse's liking, I'm sure. The running game was okay, but if they would have had Quentin Bowling, their number 1 running back, it might have been a bit more, successful. They played good defensively. They gave up a ton of yards, but they made some plays, kept their team in the game with the 2 turnovers that turned into points directly. But otherwise, not too exciting of a performance for Syracuse. If Pitt takes away those 2 mistakes, it could easily be 38-13 instead of 38-27. And off the strength of that victory, Pitt locked up some commits to start off their recruiting class for this season. The first commits to the Panthers, and it was a big recruiting visit. Ryan Bullock, the punter, decides to commit to the Panthers. Eddie Jones, who's a JUCO middle linebacker, commits. DeAnthony Hamilton as well commits to the Panthers. David Horn, the right tackle, and Ryan Matthews, the left end. So a few good players. Judging by those overalls, a lot of those are pre-scouting because remember, we only scout 3 stars and below that are in our pipeline. So like Ryan Bullock, for example, he's a 3-star, but he's only been scouted 50% so far because he's from Maryland, which is technically a pipeline state for us right now. DeAnthony Hamilton, the good signing. You can see Bullock, we chose Pitt over Penn State's interest. DeAnthony Hamilton never really showed significant interest to anybody else, but Florida State was the leading team going after him. He is a 4-star, but he's only the number 24 halfback in the country. Eddie Jones is a JUCO. He's going to come in as a sophomore next season. So he's playing his freshman year right now for Independence Community College out there in Independence, Kansas. Virginia Tech, one of his local area teams, showed some interest in, but he did choose Pitt. Great signing for us because we're definitely going to need middle linebackers for next year. We're losing our top 2 in the offseason. David Horn, that was a big pickup because the other team that had significant interest in him was Syracuse. And with us smoking Syracuse, putting on a great offensive performance, that swayed him. And so the 3-star offensive tackle chooses Pitt over the ACC rival Orange. And then Ryan Matthews, Bridgeton, New Jersey guy, 3-star. I love his size, 6'7", 260 defensive end. He's a big body. I think he's a guy that can help clog things up and play on early downs, at least for sure. Maybe in the 4-3 package, if not in the nickel and dime. But he's a good player. I like him. Guy we missed out on that we were really interested in from Skowhegan, Maine, Luke Hunt decided to stay in the Northeast and go to Boston College, so missed out on him. We wanted a tight end because we're losing our top 2 tight ends to graduation and a 3rd tight end who's a long snapper, but you know, it is what it is. We'll see if we can target any other tight ends going forward here. Bullock looks to be a great player, 88 kick power, 80 accuracy, so I really like him as a punter. He's going to come in as an 83 as a freshman, so he should be very good. DeAnthony Hamilton, just from preliminary scouting right now, 98 acceleration, 92 agility, so he looks like a guy who can move around really well, but his stiff arms, his spin moves, things like that are pretty poor, so maybe a one-trick pony, but we still have to scout him further. Eddie Jones, same thing. We didn't scout him because he's not in our pipeline. He is only a 3-star, but he's not in our pipeline, so we didn't scout him to start off with. But right away, looks good. Good play recognition. Hit power is decent for a middle linebacker. Good excel as well. He's rated for B speed, so if he's anywhere in the 80s speed-wise for a linebacker, he's going to be a solid player for us, I think. David Horn, 70 overall right now, but we're going to finish his scouting, and what a turn of events that takes. His pass block jumps up to an 81. He's a +6 gem. He looked to only be a 70 overall, but after scouting, he goes up to 76. So our first big hit in the recruiting season is David Horn. So glad we were able to get him away from Syracuse, but because he's going to be a great player coming in for us to help restock our offensive line depth. So that's a fantastic find for us to get a gem in that regard. Pretty well-rounded player, and I'm excited to get to see him in play. Ryan Matthews scouted already, 69 right now, but he does fall back to a 68, so right on par with his projection. Again, he's a good depth player. We're only going to have 3 defensive ends on scholarship coming back next season. Ronnie Baker will be graduating, so we need to just add some depth, and we get that with Ryan Matthews. Luke Hunt, though, he looks like a great player. If his catching rating is anything in the mid-70s or higher, he's a stud. 81 speed for a tight end, 80 route running, 83 spectacular catch. It's a shame we missed out on him because he looks like he's a very, very good player. He's a guy that could have competed for playing time right away. And as you look around at the rest of our recruiting board, Jordan Murphy visited last week, the Gaithersburg corner, number 5 corner in the country. He's basically signed. Vandy's showing some interest, but I think we should have him in the next week or 2. Roderick Golden visited. He's a fantastic outside linebacker. Again, we're losing a number of players this season. Outside linebacker, we're going to lose Quell Hampshire, so we need to bring in that depth. He's a guy that we're very interested in, but he's got a number of other suitors. Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, all trying for his signature. He's from Pittsburgh. He's gone to the same high school as Mac McAlevey, who's already on our roster. Hopefully that connection will hopefully tie him to the Panthers, as he showed some good interest, but he's got plenty other visits to go this season. Jamal Brown, we do have a slight lead on for the 4-star, but he's not going to be visiting us for a while. He'll visit some of these other schools. Hopefully we can stay in the running for him by the time our Week 12 visit comes around. I wanted to schedule him to an earlier visit, but he was already tied down for so many of our other home weeks. Week 12 was what we had to resort to for what was available. So we'll see how the recruiting goes for him. Very good-looking player. I think he's going to be a great addition if we can get him to come to the program. He'll fit right in with Horn, who we just signed. Isaac Carter's another guy that I think is definitely coming. Penn State, Oklahoma State showing interest, but it's not very close in that regard. Roger Mobley is a guy that UCLA and Florida State both showing interest in. He's an athlete. He's a guy that can play cornerback or receiver based on his recruiting ratings. We're going to have him visit in week 7. Hopefully that can push us ahead on him and get things done and dusted before we get into a recruiting battle with UCLA, which it looks like is going to happen for Matt Wright here, the 4-star strong safety out of Centerville, South Carolina. It's another battle with UCLA, who will be playing here in just 2 short weeks. Mobley's actually visiting for the UCLA game. I think Matt Wright is as well, so that's going to be a huge matchup with UCLA to potentially push our recruiting battle out of reach for a couple of guys that we're really interested in signing. That's going to come down to a big contest. We do have some tight ends we're going after. Joshua Stover's a guy we're looking at. Because of the fact that we didn't get Luke Hunt, and then Joe Weber, a long snapper, we've offered a scholarship to as well, because that's one of our house rules. We always have to have a long snapper on the roster. So it's just a 1-star undersized tight end. ACC games, Virginia Tech, like we saw in our in-game updates, knocked off number 1 Clemson. Travis Huff with a big game, 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns in the victory. Manning also ran for 100 yards. Ryan Winston with a great receiving performance. Will Alford, he was just okay. Clemson knows that, they have the sophomore starting at quarterback. They needed him to have a big day against a solid Virginia Tech team, and he just didn't push them over the edge. Miami beats NC State. Louisville escapes San Diego State in overtime. They were pushed to the brink. They are playing with their backup quarterback, but still a tough game there for the Cardinal to improve to 3-1. Miami, like we said, look at this comeback. They scored 24 points in the 4th quarter, including the game-winning field goal with 10 seconds to play to come away with the victory in a come-from-behind effort against NC State. Michigan knocks off Virginia, who drops to 0-3. Boston College up to 4-0. They might be knocking on the door of the rankings very, very soon. Impressive performance as they beat Eastern Michigan to go to 4-0. Illinois knocks off South Carolina. They're going to fall out of the rankings for sure, down to 1-3 already on the season, and Illinois scoring the game-winning touchdown late in the 4th quarter there. UCLA improves to 3-1, beating Oregon 31-24 in, I think it was a Thursday night game, maybe a Friday night Pac-12 showdown, national televised. Great game there. Oklahoma beats Texas Tech. Houston knocks off UCF. Notre Dame with a blowout over North Carolina, 42-17. LSU knocks Mississippi State from the ranks of the unbeatens, 35-24. Arkansas gives Texas A&M their 4th loss of the season. Texas A&M was ranked, I think, 6th or 7th to start the year. They're going to be unranked at 1-4 after they lost there to Arkansas, 31-24. Ridiculous turn of events for them. Florida escapes Kentucky. Penn State wins. Georgia, playing their 3rd-string quarterback, ends up holding off an undefeated Georgia State team 34-31 to get a victory there. Of course, we mentioned the Louisville victory already. Tennessee goes to 4-0 with a win over winless UTEP. Cincinnati continues their run of solid performances. Texas 49-7 over Kansas. Stanford escapes Colorado with a come-from-behind victory that relied again on Blake Hunter to come in and save the day. 9 completions, 14 attempts, 234 yards, and a touchdown as he came in for Thurman and performed incredibly. So again, you have to wonder, Stanford, they've been so good this year, but is there a quarterback controversy potentially on the rise? Cal 47-35 over Utah. What a performance there. Their offense continues to be incredible over the last couple of seasons. And USC blows out Oregon State 37-14. Big win there for the Trojans to stay in the Pac-12 battle. And Ole Miss, Dustin Young and company, 44-41 knocks off last year's national champions Alabama. And what's incredible is Dustin Young went out at halftime with a concussion, and because of that, Ole Miss had to bring in their backup quarterback, Tompkins, and he leads them to a victory. They relied on their running game, you can see, in the second half to get them to a victory. They came from behind to end up tying Alabama, forcing overtime and getting the victory. Tompkins struggled, 8 of 20 for 90 yards. Look how good Dustin Young was again before he went out of the game. But a gigantic performance. Pravon Dean with another incredible game. Couple of touchdowns for him to help Ole Miss knock off Alabama. Darion Williams and Brian Hand did all they could to try and propel Bama to a victory, but it just wasn't enough. Big win for Ole Miss, who looks incredible so far this year. Malik Rankin, true freshman, strong safety for Notre Dame, wins NCAA Player of the Week. Sack, forced a fumble, and a pick. Great game for him. Rodney Wilson, the senior running back for Air Force, 133 yards rushing, 5 total touchdowns in a win over Nevada. Great game there for the Falcon running back. Travis Huff, senior quarterback, like we mentioned, 4 touchdowns in the upset win over number 1 Clemson. He's ACC Offensive Player of the Week. John Scott, the Louisville defensive end, 3 sacks as Louisville beat San Diego State, like we mentioned, in overtime to win ACC Player of the Week. And another big performance in the SEC, like we mentioned, LSU's victory over Mississippi State. Corey Lucas, the junior wide receiver, 16 catches for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wow. Kelly Colio found his number 1 target in this game, and he rode him 200-plus yards there, 3 touchdowns. And we look at the Heisman race. Dustin Young, despite the fact that he went out injured, still atop the Heisman race. Pravon Dean in there as well with his great performance. But take a look at this. Davion Reynolds, 4th in the Heisman race. 2 more touchdowns for the Panthers freshman running back. 49 yards rushing, 58 receiving. He had some punt return, kick return yards as well. 2 touchdowns, and he's now 4th in the Heisman race after 5 weeks of the season. Incredible start to the career for the freshman. 57 yards a game, rushing, 4 touchdowns. Decent there. He's got 40 yards a game receiving and 3 touchdowns as well, so 7 touchdowns there. Plus, he has a punt return touchdown as well. So he's just been incredible. If he's averaging 2 touchdowns a game as it stands right now, if he keeps that up throughout the entire season, who knows, we could be seeing the first true freshman Heisman winner in NCAA history. Deontay Gordon, Texas's running back, into the Heisman race as well with a great performance in their win over Kansas. We look around the top 25. Ole Miss with their win over Bama, last year's national champions, who more than likely will not have an opportunity to repeat this year with 2 losses already. Ole Miss at 5-0, some big wins on the season already. They go to number 1 in the country. Houston and Texas and Oklahoma, all Big 12 schools. The other teams in the top 4. Florida goes up to 5. Tennessee at 4-0 is up to 6. Your Pitt Panthers go up to 8 after their victory over Syracuse. UCLA's up to 7. That's, again, a matchup we'll see in 2 weeks' time. Clemson falls from number 1 in the country to number 9. Bama drops back to 12 with their loss to Ole Miss, which I think they probably could even stayed in the top 10, but that's how the rankings always seem to go. Oregon drops back to 14 after their loss. Penn State up to 17. Notre Dame up to 19. Cincinnati, dark horse team to watch. Like I said, they're up to 21. Virginia Tech, after their victory over Clemson, I'm surprised they didn't jump higher in the polls, but they're up to number 22 into the polls for the first time this season. Oregon State falls back to 23. Arkansas State, led by quarterback T.C. Ford, is 25th in the country. A&M and South Carolina drop out, and you can see a number of schools in the running to get into the polls. Still no Boston College there, despite their being 4-0. Ohio State also not in the polls as well, which has been interesting. They do have 1 loss to Cincinnati, but they've looked decent the rest of the week, so we'll see if they can get into the rankings if they keep winning. ACC games coming up this week. Florida Atlantic, undefeated, will be the sacrificial lamb that I'm sure Clemson takes out their anger on after losing to Virginia Tech, who has a tough contest. They got to go away to Miami, who's a team that they're always so up and down. It's tough to know what you're going to get with Miami week in and week out. That should be a great game to watch. Virginia takes on SMU, UCF and Duke, Washington and Wake Forest, Florida State and Maryland, a former ACC rivalry game. North Carolina takes on Louisville, and Georgia Tech takes on Syracuse. Of course, former Pitt defensive coordinator Randy Bates looking for his first win as Georgia Tech head coach still this season. Notre Dame will host Oregon State. This is a game that Notre Dame, you have to think, is favored, and they have the talent. Their pass offense has been incredible. Oregon State just got smoked last week against USC. You have to take the Fighting Irish in this game. I think they're just much too talented, and they're going to come away with a victory. The Red River rivalry here, Texas taking on Oklahoma. Oklahoma's the better team. They've looked better this season, but in a rivalry game like this, you never know who's going to win. Rakeem Boone, number 2 prospect in the country, is visiting on behalf of Oklahoma for this game. It's going to be a great matchup. I like the Sooners in this one. Herbstreit, you can see, likes the Longhorns. Interesting to see that both teams have top 10 defenses, though. It's not something you often have in the Big 12, but it should be a great showdown. I expect a lot of points in this one. Texas Tech looking to knock off new number 1 Ole Miss. Georgia taking on Tennessee in a ranked battle. Of course, Tennessee beat us earlier in the season. Georgia is going to be missing both of their top 2 quarterbacks, and Tennessee's turnover differential is number 1 in the country this season. I expect that to continue to improve, and I like the Volunteers in this one because of the fact that Georgia's missing Carter Ford at quarterback. Oregon taking on Colorado. Of course, like we mentioned, Clemson, Florida Atlantic. Auburn, winless right now. Who would have thought going into this game Arkansas State would be the 3-0 team and Auburn would be the winless team? Incredible. Herbstreit even likes Arkansas State in this one. I mean, Auburn, they have the talent because they're an SEC school, but Arkansas State just looks better as a team, and they seem to be good every single year. They're looking to keep up that trend this year. They just dominate the Sun Belt year in and year out. We'll see if they can dominate the SEC and knock off Auburn in this one. Houston, their first ever Big 12 game as they'll take on West Virginia. Of course, both of these teams made the college football playoff last season and lost in the semis. Houston lost to Alabama. West Virginia lost to Pitt. Houston's looked okay this season. You know, they have played fairly uninspired. You can see their total offense hasn't been great. Their defense just been okay. This is going to be a real test to see if Houston is still good as they get their first Big 12 game out of the way. Like we mentioned, Virginia Tech taking on Miami. Miami's got the talent, but Virginia Tech looked incredible this season. Number 8 offense, number 2 in scoring, number 1 defense. That's going to be a great showdown. I like Virginia Tech in that one. Florida taking on LSU. Of course, Florida and LSU, both teams with national championship aspirations. LSU won the title a couple of years back, the year before Alabama when Joe Burrow was at quarterback. They have Calacolio now. He leads a great passing offense. Florida, not a great passing defense, and they've been wildly inconsistent this season. I think I like LSU in this game, even though Florida is higher ranked at this moment in time. UNC taking on Louisville. This is a great showdown for two teams that are trying to turn things around. They've struggled recently. Well, Louisville was very good last year, I should say, but UNC's been a perennial underachiever in this dynasty. I think this might be the year they turn it around. I like North Carolina in this one, especially with Louisville missing their starting quarterback. Pitt, NC State, talk about another team missing their starting quarterback. That's NC State. They went into the season with true freshman Jermaine Holloway as their starter. He got injured very early on. He's out. They'll be starting McDonald, who they started against us last year. He's not very good, and I think that is going to be a big key for us offensively. Their defense was such a strength for them. Remember 2 years ago we played them in the ACC championship game? They had the number 1 defense in the country. We had the number 2 defense. They don't have that this year. Number 109 in the country in total defense. CJ Kirk just put up 350 yards passing last week. I think he could put up similar numbers this week against NC State. They've just struggled. Tom Herman's team has really gone downhill. They had a down year last year. I think they finished 5-7, I want to say. 5-7, maybe 6-7. But they struggled last year. More of the same this year. Obviously, having their starting quarterback hurt has not helped them. McDonald's been okay. 6 touchdowns against 1 interception is decent, but he's not a guy that's really going to go out and win a game for you. He doesn't have that arm talent, and they don't have the talent on the team right now. They're going to have to lean on running back Edwin Baker. He's fantastic. He's an all-ACC level player, 111 yards a game so far this season. For the senior running back, he's very good, so expect him to make an impact. Brian Youngling should play in this game. He sat out last week with a rib injury. He's probable this week. I expect him to be back in the lineup, making an impact for us defensively. Versus NC State, they're missing some key pieces to their team. Matt Evans, solid right end. He's out for 5 weeks with a torn quad. He had 4.5 sacks last season. He's a very good player. Mills, one of their starting offensive linemen, broken wrist. He's out for the season, so that's a tough loss for him, even though he's not a spectacular player. Nick Cooper, though, is a very good player. Broken hand. He's out for 6 weeks. So they've got 2 offensive line starters out, and they have Jermaine Holloway, their starting quarterback. He's questionable with a bruised shoulder, but he is not expected to play in this game. I think they're going to wait until next week when he's going to be completely refreshed and ready to be able to play. It's expected that McDonald's going to start at quarterback again for them this season, or this game, I should say. And if you look at the NC State team, they're not bad. I mean, they have a good number of guys in the mid-80s, but they don't have any top-tier talent on their roster right now. 2 guys over 90 if you exclude a kicker. They have a really good tight end, really good halfback, but nobody to get the ball to him. Jermaine Holloway was their number 1 option at quarterback. He struggled to start the season, no TDs, 3 picks, but he's a very good player. He's got a really good arm, 93 power, 87 accuracy. He's out. George McDonald will start in his place, and he's just not as good. 14 TDs, 11 INTs last year. Struggled against us when he had to play because Dylan Parham was injured. He doesn't have a strong arm. His accuracy's not great. He's been decent so far this year, but I think we should be able to get after this quarterback, hopefully, and get some sacks. We didn't have any last week, so we'll see how things go. Edwin Baker, nearly 1,200 yards last year. He's on pace to eclipse that this year. Fantastic runner. A.J. Nugent behind him had 850 yards last year. I mean, they're stacked at the running back position. If they can get some good blocking, that's how they're going to beat us. If North Carolina State can get after us in the running game, if they can win the battle in the trenches, push through on the ground, that might help them open up the receiving game because they don't have any good receivers. I think this is finally one of the first games that you'll see where our corners, by rating anyways, I think our corners play very, very well because they all have good man coverage ratings and good speed, and we typically have them in man coverage. But in terms of just overall rating, our corners are better than their receivers. They're faster than their receivers, and they're better than their receivers. They don't have a ton of talent out wide, that's for sure. You know where they typically lean, and the area where we're most going to have to focus on is their tight end. Their tight end, Roddy Woods, is spectacular. He leads their team in receptions by like 1 billion. I think Justin Goodman was their leading pass catcher with like 12 receptions. Roddy Woods already has 22 catches on the season. He's a fantastic player. He's gigantic as well, 6'3", 270. He could be an offensive lineman if he put on 10 more pounds, but he gets around the field well, and he's a very good player. They got Sutton behind him as well, so 2 very good tight ends, but Roddy Woods especially is the impact player we're going to have to watch out for. Jermaine Harris at left tackle, 79 overall, decent. Jonathan Bryant, expect him to start at one of their offensive line positions as well because of the injuries to the guys like Casey Mills, who's going to be out. And then, of course, their center, Nick Cooper's out as well. So expect those guys to fill in. Right guard, they have Willie Stevenson, who's decent, 80 overall. Jay Harper's 82. Expect Sam Mark to fill in as well at either center or left guard for one of those injured players that's going to be out today. So their line's going to be pretty much high 70s, 1 or 2 guys touching 80. Not great, but not terrible. Clark George at left end is a decent player. He's going to have to do well to get after the quarterback with Matt Evans out with injury. Michael Crawford will be starting in his place. He's got 2 sacks on the season already, so he's not bad. And this scenario where they're good, they're young. Those guys that are going to be playing today are very young and can make an impact. Those defensive ends are solid. Ronald Jefferson is the guy to watch, 87 overall, 4.5 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons. Fantastic player, good speed. He's an impact player for them who can really, really make some things happen. Same with Justin Brown, good outside linebacker. He's got good speed, 87 overall for an outside linebacker is very good speed. I think he's a guy that can chase around Davion Reynolds, at least try and follow on his tails. Mark Robeson, only, what does he have, 1 interception in his career, which is pretty interesting. I don't even know if he had one, but he's 98 speed, 88 overall. He's a good corner. He's a good coverage player. He's a little undersized, which is why he's not a great tackler, but he's good in coverage. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be on Benjamin Ogden. He's going to be on Jay Keys, and we'll see what kind of impact he can make. They've got some decent corners, decent speed, not spectacular. And this is an area where, again, I talked about it. CJ Kirk could throw for 300 yards in this game. They're not spectacular. Look at their secondary. 77 overall, 76 overall. They're not great. I mean, they're okay, but they're not great. So I think we could really take advantage of just a lack of general ability. Joe Harrison at strong safety is very good. Good speed, good overall. He's a good player in his first year as a starter. But otherwise, they're nothing too spectacular to really shake a stick at. And I think it's going to be a matter of that we can do really well against them. So as always, guys, let me know in the comments what you think is going to be the outcome of this game. Will we be able to go victorious against NC State for the 3rd straight season? ACC championship game 2 years ago, at home last year, now away from home this year. Will we be victorious, or will we be tripped up looking ahead to next week's showdown with UCLA? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.